for this Halloween supplemental. Where were we at? I think we had done the treasurer report, chair report, or Michael, if I'm mistaken, correct me. And it was Jillian's turn for the secretary report.
Yeah. So I had a few things to run by you guys. I don't have the notes in front of me, but the first thing that came up today is that the email and password was changed for the Zoom account, and before it was kind of being used by certain ambassadors or the community to kind of set up things like, for example, the Elsewhere Hub, story halls, and that kind of thing. But since the password's changed, people can't access it now. So I was just wondering if it's cool to change the password so it's not the same as our email, and to
be a great idea, and just update the spreadsheet.
Yeah. Whatever. Which spreadsheet is that?
So if I go on, I only left it on the board drive, so it's not shared with anybody. The idea is that you need to have the board login to be in. So if you go on the board Google Drive, you will see just so it's not public, basically.
Okay.
See, I think that's called accounts on the board.
Okay.
Board's drive,
sure.
And in there you'll see all our kind of sensitive accounts. Now we can consider, maybe you can consider that Zoom is more of a social media account. We should put it on the public thing, but it's just that there's
like Zoom, I think it maybe not for the community at large, but I think ambassadors should have access to it. So I just think we just need to change the password so it's not the same as our email, but I think that we can share it so that like for like working groups or other things, they can use it for their calls.
Okay, well then, as you wish, you decide. It's just in there. I keep the logins of the important things that have.
Okay, I'll make sure to change it if we change the password. So is that cool for you, Michael? If we do that?
Yes. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah.
And by the way, okay. I don't know if someone's trying to get on the Snapchat, but the login for Snapchat didn't change. It's the Twitter that I went through an entire process to get the Twitter logging back. So we have the login. It's updated on the media.
Yeah, I haven't been trying to get in on anything. I mean, in some cases we have these geo restrictions or these like sort of fraud detection issues. But yeah, as long as we just have a central repository for that, especially and I guess this comes up in our governance conversation, but thinking through long-term transition and making sure that people don't have to go digging for this stuff. I think that's just the question.
So that's where I started that account spreadsheet. It's because we had some issue with logins with all our financial accounts. So and there is still a social media one. I mean, I don't really see any problem putting that somewhat public. I mean, it could create some problems, but I feel that could be public. But I'm not really too keen on putting the PayPal login and Stripe login and all those things that have things to do with money on the.
For sure. No, definitely. It would just be for the Zoom. So I'll just make sure to update it. And all of that. I just as the Zoom account, I think can be used for the working groups and ambassadors instead.
All right,
so that was the only thing.
Put that in, and it's because I changed the email from it was still under a personal email, one of Tia's personal emails, so I changed it to the board at Sandbox Allies.
Yep. Okay. Cool. So the next thing is that there's been a ton of people reaching out to ask about making new hubs. So as you can see, I made a doodle so I don't, we don't have to repeat ourselves a million times, that we can just kind of have a general info session, I answer all the questions, and then people can go off on their merry way. But before that session, I just wanted to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of how new hubs are created. I don't know if you saw the email I sent from Yuri and Marcelo, who are working on setting up a Johannesburg hub. But that kind of thread followed the discussions. So basically, as I understand it, the process for opening a new hub is to kind of have dinners, meet an applicant pool, and then in order to kind of launch the hub, they'd have to gather, let's say, 3 or 4 volunteers from the global group and so that it's not just like one or two people running applications, but it's like a group of volunteers, and then they would run through the applications, and whoever is the one starting it would be a default first ambassador, unless they groom somebody to come in as an ambassador. But I think generally that the person who's setting up the hub would be the ambassador. And then just in terms of onboarding, and we just kind of add the hub to the website and make them an application form, and go from there. But I don't know if there's any other process that needs to take place, like official something or another to onboard a new hub. And so I just wanted to ask you guys about that. And in your understanding, how does one go about making a new hub?
Well, it's been a long time since I've looked at it, but I do think we have a guide for it, right? Somewhere. Or there's something that speaks to it in the drive, I think I remember saying. But roughly, yeah, I think that's consistent. I mean, we also have situations where new people want to start hubs. So I think the model you described, Jillian, assumes that it's being member driven. But we've also entertained like new hubs being started by new people. And so in that case, like the application pool, like the sort of pool of an initial core needs to be formed, but then the applications for that need to be judged external to that location.
Right. Okay. So if it's somebody new, it would be kind of the same process, except that the applications would be driven by the group of volunteers as opposed to the person in the location, essentially.
I mean, my preference would be, I think that in either case, it's judged externally, because unless you have a weird situation where you do have like a bunch of, 4 or 5 different sandboxers, because I think like, and maybe we don't have strong enough guidelines about this in general, but I don't think we want hubs to accept applicants strictly on the basis of like 2 or 3 people judging applications. I know when we've done it in DC and San Francisco, they've often been like very community driven processes that at least at the initial, the kind of first stage might involve 5, 6 people.
Yeah, definitely. So like I was thinking, okay, I had like 3 or 4 in mind, but let's say that there is 1 member or 2 members setting up this hub, then they need to have enough volunteers from the outside to make 5 or 6 people judging the applications or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's especially important when starting a hub, because while I mean, I think you have to balance, like you want a core group that is connected to each other. And I've had this conversation with people that have approached me about new hubs in the past, like a while ago. But you obviously need a congruent enough group that it will like hold together. But you also just don't want to be codifying an existing social network, which I think if it's really just 2 people, the hub is 2 people, and then they're adding a bunch of people, there's maybe a strong likelihood that initial group is just like that sort of group's immediate circle of friends.
Yeah, definitely. I think in Johannesburg, as far as I understand, like Uri and Marcelo have been really trying to reach out to a diverse group of people, and they were actually Uri, he was actually hesitant for he and Marcelo to be the first ambassadors, because he felt that they were too white and not diverse enough for the city itself. But I think that they can go ahead as just the first until they can bring on the initial applicant pool. But I mean, I will tell them, of course, that the 2 of them can't go through the applications themselves. They have to have the volunteers. But in terms of just like I hate to use this word because it's very anti-sandbox, but in terms of bureaucracy, like what is there anything like official that needs to happen besides just putting it on the website and announcing that it's open, basically, after the applications go through?
I mean, maybe not. Like, I think there's maybe a question on whether every potential hub that meets those requirements is just automatically greenlit. I personally, and maybe this is the wrong instinct, and it's like not very sandboxy, but my instinct is that like you know, we don't necessarily want hubs in like super random locations, especially when we're missing like other obvious places. But I don't know, maybe there's no harm to having like, you know, for a while we had like a Chattanooga, Tennessee hub, which felt like, you know, when you
but
looked
we
at
do. I mean, we actually still had. They're just they've just been emailing me. They want to like revive it. They're like working really hard to revive it and bring in new people and stuff in Chattanooga.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I guess I'm curious if like either of you have any intuition on that.
My personal instinct is that where a Sandbox hub wants to grow, it's fine. But what we might do is ask maybe that this initial applicant pool make some sort of thing out of, you know, like a joint wow or something like this, which kind of describes their vision for the hub or kind of what they see, kind of who is in it and what kind of they're aiming for, and then we can, I don't know, is something like that, you know, so that we can kind of have something that's like, we're not just, if a hub wants to pop up, it can, but also I also don't want to put too many barriers. If somebody wants to make a hub, I think, I don't know. That's just my instinct. What do you think, Lou?
You have a hard time making a decision on this. I do like the idea that hubs are being started. There is a question to me of what a minimum viable hub is, and how people can actually prove us that. I don't really have those criterias, so that's the main difficulty for me. But ultimately, if they have someone in the middle, you know, some people in the middle of nowhere, and they have, I don't know, 10 committed members, I don't see why it would have to be a big city, why you couldn't start something in the middle of Tennessee or in the middle of a, you know, why couldn't you have a strong Kilifi hub, for instance, even though it's in the middle of nowhere? If you have 10 committed people that, you know, are settled there, don't really see why we couldn't create that. It's just, how do you define those kind of requirements to show that there are X amount of committed people to start this hub?
I mean, I think 10 is a lot, just in the sense that there are a lot of hubs that exist currently, which are less than 10 active people.
Yeah, that's why I switched it to X, because I just don't know what that number would be and how you actually.
But I think like we don't maybe want, like, we just have a problem with a lot of hubs too. So I don't think the model is maybe like what's been like. I think maybe the current, like, existing hubs are not necessarily like the standard. And I agree with you. I think like as long as there's a bunch of committed members and people are engaged and they have a sense of what Sandbox is and a vision for what they want to create, that the location doesn't matter. But I would be inclined to set a pretty high threshold for that and how big that initial batch is. Like, I don't think 5 is enough. I think the number, like, the number matters. Like, it's for defining this process. Like, we can't say X, because at some point there just needs to be guidance on that. And I think it has to be more like closer to 10 than 5.
And it goes back to the idea of like, how do we manage also the hubs? It's like, maybe today we have too many hubs that are, you know, not really active, and maybe it would be better to have a way to put them on probation, quote unquote. But we don't have any of those systems in place. We don't have an institution that could actually make this decision, which is why I think that the governance at some point is going to be a good discussion to have in right after that.
So, yeah, I mean, I think.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, let's say the number is 10, let's say it's 8, or if we feel comfortable with 10, then it can be 10. And we can ask that, you know, before a new hub, you know, despite what the existing model is, but to ask that any new hub kind of, like I said, whatever, maybe it's a joint wow or just some sort of thing that says, you know, we're the 10 people and we're committed and we're going to do this and this is our plan for the next year or two or something like this, then maybe that somehow that could just start to put a couple processes in place that like just set a precedent for like, this is what a new hub has to be. And then, never mind what's going on with the past hubs now, but just like in the future going forward, like we want to ensure that the hubs are active. So the first batch has to be 10 of committed members, and they have to do something or give the board something, I don't know, or give the community something that they can kind of okay or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we could just start with the conversation, but yeah, maybe it's worth like putting together a stronger process and guideline. I mean, I guess my basic orientation is just this, like, to Luke's point about even consolidating hubs or thinking about what does it mean that we have some hubs that are not especially functional. I would say, like, I think it's exciting to add new hubs, but we should like be pretty particular and make sure they're strong. Like, let's only bring on a new hub if we feel like it's in a place to be one of our stronger hubs, rather than another hub that we kind of have to chase after and that is like functionally not really anywhere other than on the map,
Okay. So when I give this workshop, which like 16, well, maybe 15 minus you and Luke, 15, 14 something people, signed up on the doodle for, like, it's there's just a lot of interest. So, should we just kind of put that out there as the number is like 10 for the first batch?
I'm fine with that number. Say 10 committed people, and I like the idea of that kind of plan. Like, present me a plan of what you're gonna do, what kind of events you're gonna put together. We can during that workshop. Unfortunately, I won't be able to join for that workshop because I'll be on the plane. But you can have questions about requirements, saying, hey, here's what other hubs do, like the open dinners, the demo nights, the putting up a kind of a launch retreat, or and invite in a nice place around you, and invite a bunch of people from the rest of the community. So there are things that can be done. That we can already show them as to what kind of plan they have to show us, and kind of commit to show us that they're really committed to it, and it's not just a way to create a new hub, just creating a new hub to create a new hub.
So would this mean that the applicants have to, if they're being reviewed by the outside people, they would be accepted, and then we could say there's 10, or would it be there's 10 that can go through that are committed and they have this vision, and then they go through the process of application? How would we sequence that?
I would say I need 10 people that submit an application, 10 people that fill in the application form, like that questionnaire that we have.
Well, I think the pool doesn't work though, because like some hubs have acceptance rates of 10-20% typically, so.
Okay. Well, as you said, a hub doesn't have to start with 10 members, so 5 members can be sufficient. But maybe then 10 applicants is not sufficient. A minimum of 10 applicants is not sufficient. Maybe it's higher number. I don't know. Sorry?
Yeah, I would say, like, well, I don't know. My instinct is that you have to say what, no matter what your number is. I mean, it could be you need 100 applicants, but if then, like, through the global group and whatever, like, 97 of them get cut, you don't have a hub.
Okay, so they need to bring us a bunch of good candidates, because then we're going to we can't tell you what number, but we need to be able to select 10 out of them.
And so let's say that they bring us these amount of people, and only 5 of them are accepted. So what do we do with those people who are accepted but there's not a hub yet?
Can they join the Elsewhere hub? Or is that
another thing? At some point, I had a conversation about was like trying to think through a model where we accept the class as like a group. And maybe there's like a first pass where you say, all right, give me 20 whatever applicants. We'll call people that are obviously not a fit, and then we will judge this as like, do we have, of the remaining people, are they all excited? Are they in? And like, do they make sense as a hub, and judge it as a judge it all together? I don't know. What do you think of that?
Maybe for an initial step, like the initial class, that makes a lot of sense is to take them in as a batch. And like if there are people who are obviously not a fit, then we call those. But I think it would make more sense to judge the first class as a batch, because they're the ones who are going to build the hub together.
Yeah, you can even ask people to sort of describe how they would kind of work together to build the hub, like go a little beyond the traditional application process. I mean, I guess that's part of the idea of like, can the hub itself submit a WOW, or the proposed hub submit a WOW? But yeah, maybe locating that question across the applicants and kind of asking them to envision not just their own application, but how they would work together, and then taking that as a whole. And yeah, just obviously just for the initial group, because you're sort of recognizing that for a hub to be successful, given that so much of it is managed, is almost exclusively just managed by the people and the energy of that particular core group, that you just have to have a strong group that seems committed to working together to make it happen. And it's maybe less important to judge, as long as like, you know, you sort of call people in an initial pass that we feel like definitely are not good fits for Sandbox. It's important the particular profiles of any one individual and more, to judge that initial group. And it's just a different way to think about it. I'm really open-minded on all these questions, by the way, even as I have like instincts, because it's sort of like, I think you could reframe the question in different ways and approach it just really differently.
I think it's a good idea to judge that first thing as a batch. So, you know, the outside people are going to be looking at, you know, this joint, kind of the people as a whole, and their joint WOW, whatever form that takes, whatever they choose to do, which somehow describes their plan and their vision, how they're going to engage, how they're going to be an active hub, and what they're going to bring to Sandbox, that kind of thing. I think that would be a better way to do it than judging the applicants as individually for a first batch. Okay, so we can talk with the people on Monday, I guess it is. But there was a separate proposal that Audrey asked me about, which was not about a city hub. It was about a region hub, an Asia hub. And I think I put it in the agenda, which she suggested. You have representatives from Beijing, from Singapore, from wherever else, I can't remember there, and they kind of form the reviewers to bring people into this Asia hub. I don't know how you guys feel about something that's more of a regional hub as opposed to a city hub, but yeah, so I just wanted to bring that forward.
Wait, so we have a Singapore hub that seems to be working fairly well. When I talked
her point was that right now, if people, so it's basically like, let's say they know somebody like the Singapore hub, they know somebody in Malaysia, or they know somebody in Myanmar, who they think is a really good candidate, but they're not necessarily making a new hub in that city. That it would be the Asia hub is to kind of bring someone in from Myanmar, bring someone in from Malaysia, and they would be part of the Asia hub, not the Singapore hub. They would be part of the Asia hub, and then maybe later on they'd make the new hub. But it's like the idea of bringing in a single person instead of like directly into the Elsewhere hub, because the Elsewhere hub is like the entire world. Her focus was more about building the Asian presence through this Asia hub.
Why can't they just do that with the Singapore hub? There's no obligation to be a resident of Singapore to be in. Where is Audrey?
She's one of the ambassadors of the Singapore hub.
Okay, but why can't they just add them to the Singapore hub?
I think the assumption was that the Singapore hub is for people who live in Singapore.
Okay, but is that something that's an obligation? I've never understood it that way. To me, you could actually join a local hub if you feel like it is the closest to where you'd actually interact with people. I guess my only problem with an Asia hub is that it would be a hub that kind of duplicates Singapore because it would also include Singapore in a way, or it's just like
no, but I mean Singapore is a tiny little. It's like a teeny tiny little section of Asia. Like it's it's. I mean, I think the idea was to kind of expand, bring in more members in it. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my idea is more like the realization of what it actually means then to have that Asia hub, because it means that there'll be some events for Singapore hubs and some events for the Asia wide hub, and so you have kind of like now you have two hubs to entertain or to manage, which to me sounds like an awful lot of work if you're to be ambassador of two hubs at the same time.
And plus, like viewed from the other angle, then we have like a list of like Berlin, Paris, London, and like, but Asia just doesn't get its own cities, you know.
Yeah, and for us, it's kind of it's not really pretty.
Well, yeah, it's just like Asia, Africa, whatever those things are, you know. But like, you know, but Los Angeles gets its own hub, etc. I feel like it's kind of a weird statement of our values.
Yeah, I think her concern was I think her concern was about prioritization, in the sense that if all of like these people that she's found in Myanmar and Kuala Lumpur, I think her thought was that their only option is to apply to the Elsewhere hub. The Elsewhere hub has its
but tell her
because that's generally been the practice, is that if people live in a city that doesn't have a hub, they apply to the Elsewhere hub. If that's not true, then we can rebrand that in the sense that that's not what the Elsewhere hub is, but the Elsewhere hub is full of people who are hubless and people who are nomadic. That's why we went through this whole conversation about the name change and it moved from nomad to Elsewhere.
No, but of course. But what I mean is that the I don't see any. So I can see it in the Lausanne hub, for instance, where we have people that do not live in Lausanne. They live about 2 hours away from Lausanne. So I agree, closer to than Malaysia and Singapore. But we don't put them in the Elsewhere hub. We put them in the Lausanne hub, even though we rarely see them. But we still interact with them. They're still on our mailing list. We still invite them to events when they come, maybe once or twice a year, and we still consider them as members of the Lausanne hub. If they'd like to join the Elsewhere hub, we're also really happy for them to be in the Elsewhere hub. But if they'd like to stay linked to the Lausanne hub, I don't really see any reason why we could, or the Le Mans hub, I don't see where we could not actually have them in there. To me, there was no formal obligation to be actually physically located in a city to be part of the hub. It's more of you join a geographical location or somewhere else than where we have geographical locations. But there's no obligation to be actually physically living in that city.
I mean, I'm not sure how that works in other hubs, though. I mean, I don't know how people handle that in their other hubs.
Okay, so I see like Daniel Ospina. So I mean, maybe this is not the message. Is my understanding. Yeah?
I don't know. I just like, yeah. I don't necessarily know if it's a good idea to make a regional hub. And you're right, Michael. It seems pretty strange to have, Berlin, London, Asia. I'm just thinking about it from the perspective of like, it's not 2 hours away is still drivable, but like if you're living in another country in Asia, like you're not going to be able to just, pop by, drive a long way, but still get there for dinner, I don't know if it's the same thing or not.
And I mean, I feel like this could be a much bigger conversation, because ultimately it's asking us to first conceptualize what the basic interaction model with Sandbox is. And I think what we've said is basically like it works through local interactions, going to dinners, hanging out with each other. And then there's this grand experiment of like what it means to do an elsewhere hub and have more of a virtual experience and connect in that way. So I think you could suggest we should have a regional experiment with that. The Dubai hub has also, I think it was mentioned, wanted to explore going to a more regional model. Or we just say like, okay, great. It's very exciting that you know some people across Asia that would be great fits for Sandbox. Like, how can we push that into being hubs? Because we're really missing hubs all over Asia. And I guess part of my concern about the regional approach, especially if the region is Asia, where it's like there are any number of places where we should have hubs, is that it might release the pressure to create hubs in areas where we're interested in developing them.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So maybe it's
I agree, Luke. To the extent people like come into Singapore a lot, or are located in ways that they can build a rapport with the Singapore hub, I think that's fine. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Like, if people don't have any particular interaction with the Lausanne hub, the fact that they're like most geographically proximate to it, I'm not sure if that's like. Again, it goes back to like how you conceptualize of the interaction model with Sandbox and how people become Sandboxers and what it means to enjoy the community. And I think you could conceptualize it in a much more virtual, global way. But then it's sort of like, why do we even have the emphasis on local hubs to begin with?
But why does the Asia hub fix anything? The Asia hub would have the same difficulty of not having that physical location.
Definitely. No, I think that maybe what I can propose to Audrey, and I just want to wrap up this discussion for now because it's 40 minutes in and we still need to talk about that bloody governance. Yes. But I think what I can propose to Audrey is that if there are people who have interactions often enough with the Singapore hub, that they can come through the Singapore hub. And if they don't, that it's more worth opening the conversation about them opening hubs in those cities as opposed to just coming in a general Asia hub. Does that sound kind of like what we're heading for?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I would like to see if there's an opportunity. I mean, I guess my first question would just be like, is there a group anywhere where we could push to say, all right, the first step is like, let's create a new hub somewhere.
Or if the Singapore hub would like to have somewhat of a regional presence and lead a regional presence, I would be all for that. But I wouldn't create a new Asia hub. I would thinking within the Singapore hub, or led by the Singapore hub, and the Singapore hub decides to become a more Southeast Asia hub, I think, basically.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll pass that on to Audrey. That was all I had.
Okay.
I know we want to move on, but one other thing that we won't go into, but just another thing I think about is like in the past we've had concepts of outposts, so they're like mini hubs, and maybe that's part of the answer for both these questions about new hubs first being outposts, and having maybe lower requirements for spinning up other like Sandbox locations in Asia through like a concept of an outpost.
So I really like that idea of like an outpost that is linked to the Singapore hub, and that outpost could become then its own hub. But keeping that connection with an actual active hub, I think, is also important, even if it's not a physical presence. Newsletters, invites to summits, or organizing summits together, not summits, but retreats together. Right.
So like an outpost that's connected to an existing hub that is like a baby hub. It has a baby, puts it in a region, and then it grows up to be a real Sandbox hub one day.
I'm sure Quill.
It hasn't been proposed that way in the past, but that might be an interesting model to like tie it and say you're kind of responsible as a strong hub. In general, by the way, and again, I don't think we have time to go into this, but like, I think at some point it'd be helpful to be a little more like thoughtful about which hubs are really actually active hubs, and maybe not try to, like Luke, you were saying about getting rid of, or maybe like decommissioning some of these hubs. I mean, at the very least, maybe downgrading them to a different status, or having a way to identify them as like as such. And then also that would help clarify the goal of like, how do we keep Sandbox geographies in the hub status rather than falling into the outpost status or something like that.
Yep.
Go to your room, become an outpost.
But it can also be the natural life. And it's also a signal, I think. If you show like, well, this is actually now an outpost because the local ambassador left, and it's kind of, there are still some members around there, but they're not really active. But there are some members. So if you want to take it, if you want to revive it, run with it, there is actually something there. But I think we're probably hurting ourselves by saying, oh yeah, go to the hub in X city, because I'm not going to point anybody, and then they come there and say, but there's actually nothing happening. It's like, if you actually make it clear it's an outpost, it's a bit died down, but would be happy if you picked it up. I think it's also a much clearer message, and that doesn't kind of hurt our image.
A conversation for another time.
Function.
Yeah, definitely.
Right, so it's let's put to discuss that next board meeting or in whatever way we think is appropriate. Are you done with the secretary report, or you still have some?
I'm done.
Subject. All right. So it's the governance discussion. Woohoo! Our favorite subject.
Tell me, is there another proposal?
No, there's only the one proposal now. The only thing, there's a governance working document, of course, which is a bunch of different, which is one document altogether, but with different sections that can be, of course, adopted and everything. There is a question to me of how do we actually get it adopted, but I think we already discussed kind of like how to do it. The first thing we wanted to do was to put to add the change section of that governance proposal to the bylaws, and the question is, how do we communicate this? Because what we discussed quickly last time was we will do a post on like the newsletter and on the Facebook group and say, here is what we'd like to add. We'd like to add a process to update our bylaws, because our bylaws are quite are somewhat obsolete, or some large sections of it are, and we'd like to add exactly this process, which is right now. I can do a word count if you want, because people get always a bit annoyed by how long those things are. This one is the change process is 362 words. So something to think about. It's also slightly, well, it's not slightly longer actually. We have sections of our bylaws right now that are about that length. So how do we communicate this? How long of a delay do we give people, telling them, hey, the board has decided, or the board wish? What's the lingo that we use also to introduce that? And after that, I can ask Daniel to draft just the message, but we just need to make sure we have those words and the delays that we offer people to add this change mechanism. And I will add a second thing after this, which is that right after that we want to, or at least I want to introduce another part of the proposal, which is a redefinition of how the board works, which includes, of course, adding 3 new members, 3 new board members that would have, staggered election style that I discussed. So on the schedule, the way I was visualizing it is we send this message, says we're going to add this change proposal, 2 weeks. If nobody objects, or if there's no big uproar against it, we add it to the bylaws. Then how much time do I need to wait until I introduce? Well, we're actually going to use those bylaws to add 3 new members, or 3 new board members, or to change the way the board works using the change proposal we just accepted. Or do we just introduce both things at the same time and say, well, we'd like to introduce this thing, say if you're okay or not, and then the first thing we'll do is use that process to add 3 new board members and explain why we think it's really important to do so. So that's where on the subtleties, I'm not quite sure.
My opinion is that 2 weeks is a good amount of time. I would say it's something like the board has initially ratified or initially ratified this change mechanism to add to the bylaws. We're now giving it to the community. After 2 weeks, if there's no objections, it will be officially ratified and added to the bylaws. And then I would say that the trustees rearranging would take place immediately after that ratification. This is okay. Now that we have this process and everybody's accepted that it's legitimate, this is the first kind of step. This is the first proposal that's come forward. I am totally down with that. I'd really like to make sure that this term ends in August of next year, because I can't see having the time and energy to keep serving after that. But so that's
unfortunately, I think it's not going to be August of next year. It's no more going to be January of next year. But I mean, at least you'll have some relief. I mean, and we can also transition out. I think. Well, we'll see what it means, but in practice. But I think we should actually give an entire year of overlap. But
okay, but not more than that.
Yes.
But I mean, that would be my instinct, is to kind of pose it as an initial ratification, 2 weeks, then officially, and then do the process after that. That would be my instinct. Michael,
so 2 weeks for the change proposal, and then we wait. I don't know. We add it to the bylaws, then wait how long to start the process?
You don't need to wait any time long. You can start that as soon as it's officially ratified. I just think that when you put two things together, then they get mixed up with each other. Okay. So I think it's better to do one and then the other. As soon as it's ratified, then I think we can proceed with whatever modifications that people want to do to it. Okay. I think that it's important to ratify the change mechanism first. That's my instinct.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Yeah. Is the idea we would just put it out there, or do we want to hold an info session on it?
I think we should. I think you're correct. We should put it out there and say, in 1 week there will be a open call, town hall. Anybody can come, and you can of course comment under this on the Facebook post. But there will also be a session, and we need to figure out a good time to have that session. I would say 1 week after it's posted, to give the opportunity to people to come ask questions if they have questions, and to still have another week to object, to think about it and object, and probably we should have several info sessions, probably one per continent, or big continent, regions, or time zones. I mean. 3 main time zones that we are on, and then give it an extra week for people to come back and object if they're not happy with it.
So I think it would be a separate email that's something like an important message from the board that says what we're planning to do, and so a separate email, and then with the town hall timings after the week, and then I would say that, and then we also post on the Facebook and the Slack and all of the other obsolete modes of communication that anybody is using.
Of course.
I mean, is that I'm just trying to think through how this plays out. Is there I think that's enough of a time frame if what we want is essentially to provide people an opportunity to object. But it seems tight if we want to do any co-creation or incorporate any new ideas. And maybe the answer to that is we had this giant governance process. That was your chance to get in.
No, I would disagree. The thing is that I actually expect nobody will object. But I'm completely fine that if anybody has strong objections, then we say, okay, there's a strong objections. then we will open as long as this person is committed to actually spend the time on making this this proposal better, we will extend by another 2 weeks. In my memory, I can even look at what the change proposal says. If there is an objection, it's 2 weeks minimum, and then I forget. But and then say, okay, someone objected, and I'm ready to have an extremely low threshold. Like one member says, I'm not okay with this. I think this should be reworked. And then just go to them and say, perfect, you object. Let's open a 2-week co-creation session to work on this. And I'll be happy to rework this thing over 2 weeks. But we also give a short amount of time and say, you have to be committed to do it. And if nothing comes out of this in 2 weeks, then we're moving forward. Basically, a put up or shut up kind of thing.
I think it has to be. I think it has to be a really hard deadline. Yeah, I think so. Like, I think it's if somebody speaks up and says like, I think it should be this and this, then we offer the chance to co-create, to work on it, but with a really hard deadline of like in 2 weeks. You come up with a new proposal or with a modified wording that then has another week to be in the community, and then it's a go.
Yeah,
fine with what you described, Luke. I just anticipate maybe as a result of the global summit and just time going by and more people, new members entering the community, that some people may say, hey, like, I'm interested in thinking about this. And I think it's fine if we push the process along, but I also think we don't want to at any point tell people, like, I don't know. I just think, like, I think what you described is fine by me.
Yeah, I think, yes, I think there might be some people who would say, I want to help think about this, but I think that when they mean I want to help think about it, it's like this whole new creation process. And I think it's just really important to kind of push that, like, I don't know, it to give some sort of deadline that's like this. It's really important that this process is, if you want to help rethink this, that it terminates, that it comes to a conclusion of some sort.
Yeah, and really, to me, that's how I would phrase it. It's this is a 2-week objection period. If anybody objects, so I mean, if any, it's not just a small comment. If it's like really someone like calls his right of objection, let's say, then it opens a 2-week 2-week window where he, her, and basically the people that have been involved with this governance document have 2 weeks to find a common proposal and or to do a common redraft. And if nothing comes out of after those 2 weeks, then we move forward with that proposal. Of course, the board will be here to referee or to referee this entire thing, because you could also imagine that the governance board could stall for time because they absolutely don't want something to be changed. But that's where I will probably ask Daniel to lead the defense of the governance working document. This way, the board can stay somewhat neutral, if that sounds okay with you, and we can referee and be objective about well, actually, the governance group was stalling for time, so this is not fair. This is not fair.
I think the process as you described, Luke, sounds good.
All right, so I'll put that on paper somewhere and send it to you. I will put the rest of the governance group in the loop as well, and ask Daniel, Raphael. There's a new guy that I forgot the name of. To take that role of kind of like the defense for the governance working document, because I don't think the board should be there. All right, so I'll do all this before the.
Let's say the newsletter is probably going to go out in the next couple of days, and then if the governance group is all on board, then we can draft this email, like the message from the board. Let's say by early next week or something like this. Okay. If you kind of want to move this forward.
Can you just add a hint about the fact that something's coming about governance in the newsletter? Just kind of like give a little hint that something's coming.
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
Yeah, are we going to do a separate email on that?
Yes, I think we should do a separate email.
I think we should do a separate email
with the newsletter, and then cool.
That will come after the newsletter.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but the idea is in the newsletter, just put a little hint that says, "Hey,
remember?" Yeah, I mean, I can draft an email, and of course, I'll run it by you guys before it's sent out. But I think it would be its own separate email. I think it's important enough that it has something, some attention-grabbing subject line, that's something like an important message from the board. Like I think it's important that people open it and look at it.
Yep,
for sure. I'm also, I guess I probably would need to think about this too, but and maybe we can't have the whole conversation now or any of it, but I'm also curious if your experience at the summit like changed any of your thoughts on just like Sandbox or direction or anything. I think that's worth reflecting on at some point. I'm not sure I have, but
how
I think it's I have to go because I want to try and get home before it's too late and things get crazy here. So I'm gonna get my motorcycle escort before everybody leaves. But I think we can reflect on it. I think maybe we can put it in the agenda for the next meeting.
Or we can put it in next meeting. So let's do the scheduling for the next meeting offline, I guess. I might be a bit difficult for me in 2 weeks because I might be in Los Angeles for a few days. So it might have to be in 3 weeks.
I am not near my calendar right now, so I have no idea.
No, but we'll do it offline so you can get back home.
Yeah, sure.
Offline. I mean, not on the interwebs, but not on the YouTubes.
Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
All right. Thanks all.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye.
Later. Have a safe trip back.